People are importing these Dutch steel boats from across the Atlantic. And once you understand why, you'll never look at an American pontoon the same way again. At first glance, it doesn't try to impress you. No wraparound sun decks, no towering bimini tops, no oversized outboards angled off the stern like a flexed muscle. Just a low, purposeful hull sitting quietly in the water, doing absolutely nothing to compete for your attention. And that restraint, it turns out, is exactly the point. The Linssen Grand Sturdy doesn't belong to the world of weekend warriors and marina showmanship. It comes from a country where water isn't a backdrop for leisure. It's the landscape itself. The Netherlands has been engineering its relationship with rivers, canals, and open sea for centuries. That history doesn't produce boats designed to look good at the dock. It produces boats designed to work, to last, and to be lived on for decades without apology. Meanwhile, the American pontoon sits 50 feet away, gleaming under the sun, vinyl upholstery bright, twin outboards ready. It looks like a party. It looks like money. And in almost every way that actually matters on the water, it loses. That's the quiet embarrassment nobody in the pontoon industry wants to talk about. Not in terms of speed or horsepower or cup holder count. The pontoon wins those conversations easily. But in terms of build quality, longevity, seakeeping, and the kind of value that compounds over years rather than evaporating after the first hard season, the Dutch boat operates in a different category entirely. This is the vessel that serious European boaters have trusted for generations. And a growing number of Americans are starting to ask why they've been settling for so much less. To understand why the Linssen Grand Sturdy is built the way it is, you have to understand where it comes from. Linssen Yachts was founded in 1949 in Maasbracht, a small river town in the southern Netherlands, sitting directly on the Maas. This wasn't a place that romanticized the water. It depended on it. Commercial barges moved goods through those waterways daily, and the families who built and maintained them developed an engineering culture rooted in one principle above all others. If it fails on the water, there is no pulling over. That culture never left Linssen. Decades later, the company remains family-owned, still operating from the same region, still building every hull from steel, rather than chasing the lighter, cheaper alternatives that dominated the American recreational market. Steel costs more to work with. It demands more skill. It adds weight, and it lasts 40 to 60 years when properly maintained, which is precisely why serious European boaters have never questioned the choice. The American pontoon industry grew from an entirely different set of values. It emerged in the post-war leisure boom of the 1950s, built around aluminum extrusion, flat deck simplicity, and the idea that boating should be accessible, affordable, and fun. Those aren't wrong values. But they are different values, and when you build an entire industry around accessibility rather than longevity, the boats reflect that priority in ways that eventually become impossible to ignore. Linssen didn't build boats for a leisure market. They built them for people who intended to use them seriously, maintain them carefully, and pass them on. That original purpose is still visible in every weld, every through-hull fitting, every engine room designed with enough space to actually work in. The heritage isn't marketing, it's structural. What makes the Linssen different isn't a features list, it's a philosophy. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. The steel hull doesn't just last longer than aluminum, it behaves differently in the water. Displacement hulls like the Linssens sit in the water rather than skimming across it. That means a smoother, more stable ride in chop, less fuel burned at cruising, speed, and a hull form that actually gets safer as conditions worsen rather than becoming unpredictable. It's honest engineering. The boat does what physics intends it to do, rather than fighting against it. Step inside and the same thinking continues. The woodwork is solid, fitted by hand, built to feel permanent. The galley has real countertops, proper storage, and a stove that doesn't feel like a camping compromise. The helm station is laid out logically, with instruments where your eyes naturally fall and controls where your hands naturally reach. Nothing is placed for appearance. Everything is placed for use. Compare that to a premium American pontoon interior. Bright colors, plush seating, Bluetooth speakers built into every surface. It feels great on a Saturday afternoon in calm water. But the materials are soft, the fittings are light, and after a few seasons of sun and spray, the gap between how it looked in the showroom and how it looks at the dock becomes harder to ignore. The Linssen doesn't have that problem because it was never designed to impress you on the day of purchase. It was designed to reward you on the day you sell it. Or more likely, the day you hand it to someone you care about. That's a different kind of ambition entirely. Not louder, not flashier. Just better in the ways that take years to fully appreciate. The Linssen Grand Sturdy 40.9 AC is 12.4 meters long and 4.1 meters wide. Those numbers matter because they tell you something important. This is a boat sized for real living, not just real visiting. The beam gives you interior space that feels residential rather than nautical. The length gives you separation between sleeping, cooking, and socializing that most pontoon owners have simply never experienced on the water. Below deck, the master cabin sits forward with a proper island berth, not a converted dinette or a folding compromise. Headroom throughout runs close to 2 meters, meaning adults stand upright and move naturally through the boat rather than performing the constant half-crouch that defines life below on most recreational vessels. The heads compartment is fully separate, with a proper shower enclosure, hot and cold pressure water, and the kind of finish quality that doesn't deteriorate after the first season. The galley runs along the port side with genuine worktop space, a 2-burner cooktop, a refrigerator that actually holds temperature, and storage deep enough to provision for a week without rationing. This isn't camping with a waterfront view. It's a home that happens to move. The engine room is where the Dutch philosophy becomes most visible to anyone who has ever tried to maintain an American production boat. Standing headroom. Logical component layout. Service access built in from the first design drawing, not retrofitted as an afterthought. Twin diesel engines, typically Volvo Penta units in the 150 to 200 horsepower range, paired with shaft drives that are simpler, more reliable, and cheaper to service than the outboard stacks that dominate the pontoon world. And because no two Linssens are finished identically, the joinery, the upholstery, the deck layout, each boat carries the specific decisions of its original owner. That individual character is something a production pontoon, built to a price point and a delivery schedule, will never offer. Then there is what this boat can actually do. And this is where the conversation changes entirely. A Linssen Grand Sturdy crosses the English Channel. It navigates the Rhine through Germany, the French canals down to the Mediterranean, the coastal waters of Norway, where the weather makes no promises, and the anchorages are earned rather than reserved. It does these things not as an adventure or an exception, but as a matter of routine, because it was designed for exactly this kind of use. The displacement steel hull handles open water conditions that would make a flat-bottomed aluminum pontoon genuinely dangerous. When the wind builds and the chop shortens, the Linssen settles into its work. The pontoon goes back to the dock. That capability gap is the quiet embarrassment the American leisure boat industry has never had to confront directly, because the two worlds rarely meet. Pontoons dominate inland lakes where the water is calm, the distances are short, and the conditions are predictable. In that environment, they perform perfectly well. But move outside those boundaries and the limitations become structural, not circumstantial. The hull form simply cannot cope with what open water asks of it. A growing number of Americans are beginning to understand this. Some are finding Linssens and Valkreisers through European brokers, buying boats that are 10 or 20 years old and still in remarkable condition, and either shipping them across or sailing them home. They form a quiet community, not loud about it, not evangelical in the way of converts, just quietly certain that they found something they mainstream market wasn't offering them. They paid less than a new pontoon costs. They got more than a new pontoon offers. And they own something that will still be on the water long after the pontoon has been forgotten. Pull back far enough, and the picture becomes clear. The American pontoon market generates billions of dollars every year. It is loud, heavily marketed, and built on a simple promise that boating should look like success. Gleaming aluminum rails, oversized engines, premium sound systems, and enough deck space to host a party that the neighbors can hear from the shore. That promise sells. It sells extremely well, and it has built an entire industry around the idea that more is more, that bigger means better, and that the right boat is the one that turns the most heads at the marina. The Linssen Grand Sturdy was built around a different question entirely. Not what does this boat look like on the day you buy it, but what does it feel like to live on the water in it, year after year, decade after decade, in a vessel that rewards patience and punishes neglect far less than anything the American market produces at scale. That is not a marketing question. It is an engineering question. And the Dutch have been answering it the same way since 1949. The steel hull that seemed heavy and old-fashioned to the showroom buyer becomes the reason the boat still exists 30 years later. The hand-fitted joinery that seemed understated compared to the glossy pontoon interior becomes the thing that still looks right when everything cheaper has faded, cracked, and been replaced twice over. The engine room that seemed oversized and unnecessary becomes the reason the owner can service the boat themselves on their own schedule without waiting for a dealer who is backed up 6 weeks and charging accordingly. Restraint, it turns out, is not a limitation. It is a design decision. And when it is made deliberately, by people who understand what a boat needs to survive, real use over a real lifetime, it produces something that the market rarely recognizes on day one, but almost always respects 20 years later. This is what the pontoon industry does not want you to sit with too long. Not because it is hiding anything, but because the comparison only becomes damaging over time. A new pontoon and a new Linssen, standing side by side at the broker's dock, are not obviously unequal. The pontoon is newer looking, more immediately comfortable, easier to step aboard and imagine owning. It wins the first impression. It is designed to. The Linssen wins every impression after that, quietly, without making a point of it. That same Dutch hull sitting in the water now, the one that didn't try to impress you at the beginning, looks different once you know what you're looking at. The low profile isn't modesty. It's stability. The steel sides aren't heaviness. They're decades. The absence of chrome rails and oversized outboards isn't simplicity. It's confidence. The specific confidence of something that doesn't need to perform because it already knows what it is. Some boats are built to be sold. They are optimized for the moment of purchase, for the showroom, for the boat show floor where lighting is flattering and salespeople are skilled, and the financing terms are structured to make the decision feel inevitable. Those boats serve their purpose. They move product. They generate margin. They get replaced. Some boats are built to be used. They are optimized for the open water, for the long passage, for the morning 10 years from now, when the owner walks down the dock and feels the same quiet confidence they felt the first time they stepped aboard. Those boats accumulate meaning rather than losing value. They develop histories rather than maintenance problems. They get handed down. The Linssen Grand Sturdy belongs to the second category. It always has. That is not an accident of heritage or a happy consequence of European taste. It is the result of a company that asked the right question from the beginning and never stopped answering it the same way, regardless of what the market rewarded in any given decade. A growing number of Americans are beginning to find their way to this conclusion, not quickly, not loudly, but with the particular certainty of people who have done the research, looked at the numbers, spent time on both boats in real conditions, and arrived somewhere the marketing never pointed them. They are not converts in the evangelical sense. They are simply people who looked past the first impression long enough to see what was actually there. And what was there, sitting low and purposeful in the water, not trying to compete, not trying to impress, was a boat built to last a lifetime. That turns out to be exactly enough. Act 6 is complete. The closing loop mirrors the opening image of that quiet Dutch hull sitting beside the American pontoons, now reframed through everything the viewer has learned. The final line, short, declarative, verdict-like, lands the same way the Cam Road script ends. Without fanfare, without explanation, just quiet certainty. The thesis completes its final rotation. Built to last a lifetime is not a limitation. It is the whole point.